Hello, denizens of YouTube, and welcome to Digital Daemon, where today we are embarking on a quest through one of my all-time favorite narratives in the video game format, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. Straight out of the mind of Kotaro Uchikoshi, this little yarn can really finesse its way around a mindfuck. Plenty of series can pull a Danganronpa, unloading your skull in spectacular fashion, and in fact, one of the entries in that franchise is my all-time favorite visual novel. But for my money, nothing truly outdoes an Uchikoshi title when it comes to setting the mood, lubing your ear up, and really bukakeing your brains. We are jumping straight in with no further preamble, so if you're ready to get that hot, sticky plot all over your face, you might want to cool off in the shower for a minute, because I'm not going to lie, there is about an hour toward the beginning of this game that does kind of drag. So, between the two variations of gameplay we are offered, I am going to attempt to lean on the novel variation. This is both because I don't see very many players opting to go through the game that way, and more substantially because that is the more accurate representation of how the game played in its original form on the Nintendo DS. And that just makes this all the much more a satisfying nostalgia trip. One aspect of the original experience I will not be able to preserve entirely, though, is the visual element. I don't know a great deal about the process that went into porting this game in particular to the PC, but I will say that some of this did not look as fucking janky when I played it on the little handheld screen of the Nintendo DS. A loud noise startled Junpei awake, and his eyes snapped open. As they adjusted to the light, he realized that he didn't recognize his surroundings. With a crack, Junpei's head connected with something metal. He rolled over and threw out his hand to steady himself, but he found himself groping at empty air.
Whoa! Ouch! God damn it! Ow! What the hell?
What the hell is pretty much what I'm saying too, Junpei. I'm not used to the PC controls, and I didn't mean to skip over all of that text there. His balance lost, and his still fuzzy mind struggling to understand what was going on, Junpei tumbled down to the cold, gray floor. His whiny bitching dampening even the roaring of the ship.
A bed? I fell pretty far. That really hurt. Damn, my eyesight's kind of blurry. Must have hit my head. No, wait. That's not it. An earthquake! But it's shaking too fast for that. Anyway.
Hold on, I think something's off here. Yep, somehow I got switched into adventure mode. Okay.
Am I?
His pain was momentarily forgotten in the face of the minutes passed while struggling to get his bearings. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the tremors ceased.
Wait, it stopped?
A cold silence fell over the room. From somewhere far away, Junpei could hear the sound of metal squeaking.
What's that sound?
In an attempt to distract himself, Junpei looked around the room once more. There was a stove that looked more antique than functional. The 3-level bunk bed mattresses that were so thin that they were little more than blankets. On the other side of the room was an identical bed, and, set in the wall between the beds, was a slightly dirty iron door.
That's...
The first thing Junpei noticed about the door was the number roughly emblazoned across it. On the surface of the door, in red paint, someone had written 5.
5? What's this 5 mean?
Suspicious, and still utterly confused, Junpei approached the door slowly. Standing at last in front of the door, Junpei grabbed hold of the L-shaped handle.
It won't open.
A push yielded no movement, and a pull the same result. It didn't matter how much he pushed and shoved. The handle wouldn't budge. Next to the door was an odd-looking device that reminded Junpei of a card reader. Junpei knocked hard on the door.
Hello? Is anyone there? Open the door!
There was no response. Junpei threw his left fist into the door and stopped.
Huh?
He wasn't really sure what else to say. On his left wrist was a bracelet of a sort he'd never seen before. In the center was a large LCD display.
A watch? It doesn't look like one. 5. That's the same as the door.
True, the numbers were the same, but he had no idea what that might mean. All he knew was that it was strange and new, and he wanted it off. Junpei flipped his hand over, as if to remove a watch, but...
What? How do I take this off?
The other side of the bracelet was solid. No buckle, no clasp, nothing. He sighed and flipped the thing back over. There were a number of rivets around the rim of the face. Perhaps...
Maybe pushing something on this will work?
He pushed them, but nothing happened. On a watch, they might have been dials for adjusting date or time. But on this bracelet, they did nothing.
Nothing. Damn. Guess I'll have to force it off.
Growing more desperate, he began to tug at it. However...
No good. This stupid thing won't come off.
A steel ring ran from the face, around Junpei's wrist, and back into the face. He wouldn't be pulling the bracelet off any time in the near future.
What the hell is the deal with this thing?
Frustration and desperation were beginning to mix as the reality of the situation began to dawn fully on Junpei. So much was happening, and none of it made sense. Junpei felt as though he was about to explode.
Where am I? And why the hell am I here? Why? What the hell happened to me? My head.
Pain bloomed, but he did his best to shake it off. He raised his head. It was at that moment that he noticed the window.
This is...
The window was round, rimmed in riveted brass, like a window from an early 20th century ship.
Am I on a ship?
Junpei walked slowly toward the window. He could see nothing beyond it but thick, impenetrable darkness.
I can't see anything. If only it wasn't so dark outside.
Junpei squinted, trying to see something, anything. It was at that moment...
Huh? What the... Oh, you gotta be kidding me. What the hell is going on here?
A crack split the glass of the window, and, for a moment, Junpei just stared at it. Then, the window burst, and water began to pour into the room.
What the hell? God damn it!
Junpei yelled and spun around. His feet slipping on the water already coming through the window, he ran for the door.
Hey! Anyone! Is anyone there? Come on, if you're there, say something!
There was no reply. As Junpei screamed and pounded on the door, the water began to rise. It was now ankle deep on the floor, and rising quickly toward his knees.
It's not stopping. Not good. Not good at all. I need to find a way out fast.
Junpei ran a hand across his forehead, brushing the sweat out of his eyes, and looked around the room. All right. Junpei may have had a chance to get his bearings, but I have not. Going by this map, we have on the north and south sides bunk beds so tight they could be used for human trafficking, and to the east, certain death. So yeah, I share Junpei's urgency to resolve this quickly. And hopefully I can prove this by remembering the solution to this puzzle without much incident. Ah, the tutorial. Probably not super necessary. It really doesn't get much simpler than point-and-click gameplay. Truly, one would have to be among the most time-ravaged of grandmas to not understand it. But that certainly isn't stopping the game from expanding upon this tried-and-true genre at length. Doesn't seem like there's anything in the sink. This is the only drain in this room. What else is around here? I know. I'll crawl into the pipe and find a way out. Junpei, man, if that's how you're thinking, the only escape you're gonna find isn't a crack pipe, bro. There's no one here to make fun of my lame jokes. Don't worry, Junpei. I got you, bro. Yeah, kind of stating the obvious there. I don't see how we're going to stop that much water anytime soon. I know there's a key or something hidden under one of the pillows. Oh yeah, let's just use the bedsheets to plug up the window. That'll totally stop the incoming torrent of water. I love that there are multiple ways to inspire Junpei to the same stupid idea. He literally just explained that this wouldn't work like 30 seconds ago. I'm actually having a little bit of trouble finding some of the puzzle clues right off the top of my head, which is unusual. I'm used to the DS version where in order to get all the different endings, you have to play through the game so many times that you just end up essentially memorizing the solutions to all the puzzles. Though I suppose the inclusion of a flowchart means that you don't have to put in that same amount of effort to move from point to point in the story anymore. While I might not remember where all the items in this room are hidden, I do quite clearly remember how to combine them, which is how we managed to beat the game to the punch on this tutorial here. Ah, that's where the blue key was hidden. I don't know why I was remembering it being under one of the pillows. Now we just need the red one and the second half of the passcode. And one of these two remaining items should be hidden under a pillow on the bunk bed, if I can just remember which one it is I actually have to examine. I wasn't having much luck with that previously. But amidst all of Junpei's ramblings about how to best handle the bed sheets, we seem to have finally found it. So it looks like the passcode for the blue briefcase is 0263, and for the red we have 7485. I mentioned earlier that a player can actually memorize a lot of the solutions to this game, and that actually goes up to the point that most of what I've just done can be skipped if the player happens to remember the numerical sequence that opens these two cases. If so, they can just pop them open and get what they need to exit the room right off the bat. There are no checks in place to make sure you've actually gone through the trouble of completing the rest of the puzzle. And now that we have the briefcase open, we will be rewarded with a folder containing another tutorial. Imagine that. But this one is pretty significant. It goes into detail explaining how to calculate digital roots, which is a mechanic that will be very important to the game going forward. Because let me warn you now, this game really does have a boner for numbers. They are everywhere. Like, if you think this room was bad, we haven't seen anything yet. There are numbers all over this ship. And without getting into too many specifics, calculating digital roots plays a big role in letting the player engage thoughtfully with the mysteries the story presents. I'm sure that doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but trust me, it'll become a lot clearer as we advance through the story. And even beyond that, I feel like the presence of so many numbers help to sort of set the player's mind into conspiracy mode and get them to overthink what the significance of all the different numerals floating around them might be. And while that might sound like a minor detail, in my experience it goes a long way to making the player feel immersed in the story. But boy, I did not realize how long this tutorial went on for. I feel like I've been talking over this for quite a minute and it still isn't over. But yes, alongside our lengthy explanation of digital roots, we also receive a number of numbered keycards, which will doubtlessly be helpful in using that card reader by the door to escape. You give me one more colored key, and I'm turning this into a Resident Evil Let's Play.
I should probably hold on to this key.
Whoops, didn't mean to pull the log up right there. Honestly, the controls on the PC version are just so much more confusing. Junpei grabbed the key and shoved it into his pocket. He intended to leave immediately, but something stopped him. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror,
What's up with my
but
face?
he scarcely recognized himself. His confusion was well
like a
justified.
zombie.
His face was drawn and pale, and the dark circles under his eyes made him look as though he was nearly dead.
Man, what the hell happened to me? How did I end up here? I left work, headed back to my apartment, and...
Even as he said it, something in his mind opened, and a memory bubbled to the surface. It was the last thing Junpei remembered before waking up in the strange room. It was past midnight when he came home. Junpei shuffled up the stairs and opened the door to apartment 201. Inside was his apartment. A small one-bedroom affair that ran him about $630 a month. He moved into it when he entered college, and so far he'd been here for 3 years and 7 months.
I'm back. Not like anyone will respond.
He stepped inside and turned the lights on. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling blinked and flickered slowly to life, as if waking from a deep slumber.
Man, work was rough today.
Their cold light illuminated the landscape he'd come home to so many times before. Everything was as he'd left it. The magazines piled up in the corner, the textbooks collecting dust, the CD cases covering the floor, the jeans and t-shirt he'd worn the day before, then tossed onto the floor. There was one thing that didn't belong, however.
Huh? A breeze.
The white curtain framing his window swayed gently in the cold wind.
Huh, that's weird. Did I leave that open?
Junpei walked toward the window, trying to remember if he'd closed it or not before he left. One of the panes was hanging open. He stuck his head out and looked around.
Everything looks okay. I must have forgotten to close it.
He closed the window. Then it happened.
What?
Junpei turned and found himself face to mask with a man dressed all in black. The man wore a deep hood and a bulky gas mask which hid his face entirely.
Who are...
Suddenly he couldn't finish. Junpei tried to yell, but all he could manage was a strangled croak.
I can't...
Junpei collapsed to the floor, a crumpled heap of limbs, like a discarded puppet. Too late, he noticed the white smoke that was quickly filling his apartment. A small object, shaped distressingly like a grenade, sat on the floor in front of his face, hissing. The white smoke poured out of it at an incredible rate. The smoke had grown so thick that the details of Junpei's apartment began to fade into the white haze. He could feel his mind begin to fade as well, a white haze that was not the smoke creeping into the edges of his vision.
Consider this a privilege. You have been chosen.
A rasping voice wormed its way out of the gas mask. It was cold and harsh, and distorted in some way Junpei couldn't put his finger on.
You are going to participate in a game. The memory game. It is a game where you will put your life on the line.
That was the last thing Junpei remembered. The white smoke overpowered him. The masked man faded from his vision, and he felt his consciousness fall away into the white mist.
That's right. That guy with the gas mask. That son of a bitch must have taken me here. When I get my hands on him...
He ground his teeth in frustration and strained to remember anything about his attacker's figure.
Well, I guess there's no way to know if that was a man or not.
The voice had been cold and mechanical, likely passed through a voice changer. and the body had been covered in a thick cloak.
Just who was that? They said, "You have been chosen."
What it might mean, that was
What the hell is
beyond
going
him.
on? Why me?
There was only one thing from his memory that seemed important.
You are going to participate in a game. The memory game. It is a game where you will put your life on the line.
The nonary game. Huh.
What the hell is a nonary game? God damn it!
With a yell, Junpei drove his fist into the mirror. Well, that gives us a very brief backstory on Junpei. Apparently, he is a college kid some jigsaw motherfucker went ahead and yeeted from his dorm room and tossed onto a boat. You know, I've never actually seen a Saw movie, but I think it's something of a break in form to set one on a boat. Maybe their last attempt at rebooting the series didn't go so hot, and some executive somewhere was just chilling, listening to a little Lonely Island Boys, and thinking to himself, you know what this franchise needs? A motherfucking boat. 9 people on a boat with a jigsaw killer. Next chapter in my psychological thriller. Bombs that rip the whole finna burst inside your throat. 9 persons trapped forever on a sinking boat. Yeah. I should probably never attempt to do that again. Pretend that didn't happen. It's actually pretty funny. After all of my talk earlier about how a person can completely skip this segment by just memorizing the combinations to these suitcases, here I am unable to remember which corner of the room the damn closet's in. Seriously, that segment we just sped past was over 2 minutes of me just bumbling the fuck around what's effectively a broom closet. For the amount of time I wasted, that water must seriously be up to Junpei's ass. I mean, damn. I'm surprised I got off to such a rocky start with the tutorial puzzle. But the effort was not in vain. We now have the passcode to our second suitcase, and it is 7485. So let's go ahead and put that in. Alright, we have our last set of keycards and all the information we need about digital routes, so let's go ahead and get Junpei out of this room before anything else goes wrong. So, to get a digital root of 5, we're going to need 3 numbers whose sum is either 14 or 23. The highest number we can make with the cards on hand is 21, so that second option is out. So we're trying to get to 14. 1 plus 6 is 7, and 7 plus 7 is 14. Accompanied by a wall of angry water, Junpei shot out of the room and into the opposing wall.
Ow!
Yeah, I'd be in such a hurry to get out of the room, I probably wouldn't think about how the water pressure was going to just rock my shit when I did open the door. The water tossed and turned him like a washing machine, and he only stopped rolling when he hit his head on the wall.
My head. Wait, is it over? Whew. That felt too much like being flushed down a toilet. Damn.
Junpei struggled to his feet in the still rushing water.
Well, better than drowning, I guess. Am I in a hallway?
You're in trouble is where you are. Seriously, how is the water already rising that quickly across this large of a fucking surface area? Let's get the hell out of here. The water that had followed him out of the room was rapidly pouring out of the door. It flowed quickly down the hallway and slammed into the foot of the short flight of stairs. Oh. Just 5 steps, in fact. And at the top of this short staircase...
A door! Another door! Damn this water! God, let me go!
Junpei leapt up to the stairs, straight for the door.
Oh, yes! It opened!
The door burst open, and Junpei exploded out of it, only to freeze in his tracks. What other possible response could there have been to what he saw?
What the hell?
See, when you heard me joke earlier about turning this into a Resident Evil Let's Play, I bet you didn't expect the imagery to go along with it. His voice trailed off, and all he could do was stare. A polished floor stretched out before him, ornate staircases rising up from the edges, each one of them equidistant from the others. The stairs and pillars were solid wood, and Art Nouveau embellishments and decorations covered the walls and pillars. It looked like nothing so much as the entrance to a luxurious mansion from the early 1900s.
This is the inside of a ship?
Junpei couldn't help but wonder.
Well...
The water quickly filling the hallway behind him suggested that, yes, he was. As he looked, a fresh wave rolled out of the room he'd been in, gathering speed as it moved toward the stairs.
This is totally Wait, what the hell? A wave? Oh, shit! Shit! Okay, I gotta get
Junpei spun around, his wet shoes squeaking in protest on the polished floor, and ran toward the tremendous staircase in front of him.
C-deck! B-deck! Hurry! Hurry!
As he ran, he glanced quickly at the plates mounted on the wall, denoting the decks of the ship.
A-deck's next!
He took the stairs 2 at a time, not entirely sure where he would find himself. Just as he began to wonder where, in fact, the stairs did lead...
What?
Junpei saw another person out of the corner of his eye.
People!
He stopped short, nearly tripping over the next stair, and looked. It wasn't just one person he'd seen. On the landing to the left of the stairs, there were 4 people staring at him, and on the right side, 3 more.
A lot of people.
All told, there were 7 of them. It looked as though they had been on their way down the stairs. They'd stopped short when they saw Junpei, their eyes wide. He'd done the same, of course, and now they stood there, staring at one another. Junpei didn't move, one foot placed awkwardly in the next step, in the middle of a stride. Who were these people? Imagine these are the kidnappers and they all just start beating the shit out of Junpei. Even the little pink-haired girl there just busting out some Krav Maga on his ass. This entire interaction lasted only a matter of seconds. The woman spoke to Junpei, and time began to move again.
I guess it's another one of us now.
A dancer?
The woman was dressed, Junpei thought, rather like a dancer. Her clothes covered very little, and her prodigious jewelry little
No,
more.
I'm not. You better get moving.
With no further ceremony, she ran straight past Junpei toward the doors behind him.
Okay then.
The sudden proximity of a woman with such striking assets left Junpei momentarily stunned. Look at all that fan service just flapping around. But the others wasted no time, and quickly followed the strange woman.
Silver hair?
Huh?
The first to pass Junpei was a young man with silver hair. He threw a quick glance in Junpei's direction as he ran, muttering,
One of us, huh?
What?
Nothing.
Following him was an older man, his face calm and without fear. Soft wrinkles sprouted from his eyes, and he came close enough as he passed for Junpei to see wisps of gray in his hair. His composure and shock of hair struck Junpei as rather like that of an elderly
Going
lion.
up won't do you any good. There are 2 doors, but neither of them will open.
Wait, hold on. The doors won't open?
The next to speak to Junpei was a girl with pink hair and a high voice.
Come on! Aren't you coming? You gotta hurry!
Her small hand was wrapped around the wrist of another man. His eyes were closed, almost as though he were sleeping. His features were graceful, almost serene, and he was dressed rather elegantly for someone his age. Something about his posture seemed very refined, and Junpei couldn't help feeling he was noble and dignified somehow. He'd certainly never seen one, but this man seemed like what Junpei had always imagined a prince would be
That's
like.
9 of us then. All of the cards are in hand.
What does that mean? Ooh, that is suspicious. The rest of us don't know up from down right now, but our fair prince here seems to almost find all of this predictable. Junpei opened his mouth to ask what the other man had meant, but the girl with
Wait.
pink hair rushed past him.
They're gone. Just what is going on? There's an old man like a lion, a girl with pink hair, and a prince, and I have no idea what they're talking about.
He turned just in time to see 2 more people running toward him. One of them had hair like a bird's nest, and looked as though a stiff breeze might topple him, and the other was a veritable mountain of a man. He too looked like a pair of mismatched sitcom characters. Oh my god. That whole interaction came off as really awkward, like this dude's just some random tweaker they picked up and threw on this boat with us. The scrawny one scuttled past Junpei as though he were running from something.
Hey! What the hell are you just standing there for?
I think he might be running from this guy.
Didn't you hear him? The doors on A deck are no good. We gotta check the doors on B deck. Got it? Now go!
Before he had a chance to respond, the man laid a massive hand on Junpei's shoulder. With no more effort than Junpei would have used to brush aside a fly, the man shoved him out of the way. Thrown off balance by the man and recent events, it took Junpei a few steps to get his bearings. He finally regained his balance and looked up at what the other 7 had been running toward.
Hey man, that was dangerous. Huh?
There were 2 pairs of large iron doors set into the wall in front of him. They looked quite sturdy, and each had handles jutting from them. Written across the surface of each door in red paint was a number. The door on the right
4? And this one says...
They're the same.
The guy Junpei had decided to call Silver was mumbling to himself.
The room I woke up in had a number on the door just like that.
You too, eh?
With an arched eyebrow, the lion looked over at Silver.
My cell was the same. A number upon the door. I opened it, ran down the hallway outside, and found myself in a rather grand room full of stairs, as I suspect with the rest of you.
It was as if the floodgates had been opened. They all began to talk at once.
Me too.
Same for me. There was a door with a number on it.
It soon became clear that each one of them had awoken in a room with a locked door and solved a puzzle to escape. They'd all ended up in the same room, almost as though they'd been guided there.
Yes, we all saw the same thing. That's not important. We need to hurry.
You think I don't know that lady?
Before the dancer had time to finish, Silver was already running.
Open! Damn it!
He grabbed hold of the door labeled 5 and pulled. However,
Fuck, it's not opening. This damn thing won't even budge.
Out of my way!
the mountain grabbed Silver's shoulder and tossed him aside. His path cleared, he took a few steps back, then threw himself at the door. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. The door shook as his body slammed into it, but showed no signs of breaking or opening. The mountain threw himself at the door again.
A body slam from a guy that big didn't even budge.
I mean, Seven's a big dude, but it would
Must be some other
require
way.
beyond bone-shattering force to open one of those doors. Junpei turned toward door 4. Next to the door, on the wall, was a small box.
This looks just like the device next to the door in that room earlier. So that means this door is probably locked too. But still...
He had to check. Junpei grabbed a handle and threw all of his weight onto it. I think it's too late to pump iron there, Junpei. It's not gonna happen. It was locked as tight as the door next to it, as he'd suspected. Junpei punched the door. It did not respond.
Are there any other doors?
He'd barely finished the thought when the C-deck plate he'd passed on his way up sprang, unbidden, into his mind. His body moved before he had time to think. Junpei turned and ran back toward the stairs. He had scarcely taken a step when... At the top of the stairs, next to an ornate clock embedded in the wall, he saw a person. It was a girl. She looked to be the same age as Junpei. He froze, unable to look away from her face. He wasn't confounded by beauty or something equally silly. No, there was another reason he couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Junpei had seen her somewhere before. He couldn't quite remember where, but he knew. He knew he'd met her before. The girl, too, stared at Junpei, similarly stunned. Her response suggested she'd seen him before as well.
Huh?
Without saying a word, Junpei walked slowly toward her. She didn't move. It was almost as though she were held in place by some sort of magic spell. As Junpei stepped onto her landing, the spell broke. Considering our protagonist isn't supposed to be confounded by love or beauty right now, the writing really is going out of its way to cue up a romantic moment. No sooner had he set his foot down than the whole ship shook a second time. The quake caught the girl unprepared, and she fell.
Watch out!
Moving on instinct, Junpei leapt to catch her. Or so he thought. But instead, the two tumbled into fan service trope number 47, or, as the normies know it, accidental cowgirl.
Oh,
Her face was far closer than it should have been, mere inches from his own.
Yeah.
He was flat on his back, and she had landed squarely on top of him. The girl seemed as confused as he did, and her face suggested she still hadn't fully recovered from seeing him. For a moment that seemed to stretch for a very long time, they stared at one another. The ship stopped shaking. Everything was quiet. Water could be heard from the bottom of the ship, lapping faintly at the walls and ceilings. But eventually, that faded as well. The silence was complete. A thick, muffling blanket. At last, the girl opened her mouth.
Oh my gosh! Is that you, Jumpy?
Jumpy. Jumpy. Her words echoed through Junpei's head, and suddenly his memory returned.
Akane.
Why hadn't he realized it before? The girl was Akane Kurashiki. She and Junpei had been friends in childhood. They'd gone to elementary school together for 6 years. But what was she doing on the ship? Her soft eyes were only inches away from his own. He could feel the warmth of her face. Feelings he'd thought long forgotten began to work their way to the surface. He could feel his face heating up. At that moment, a speaker crackled to life, and a cold, eerie voice filled the room. Well, at least Zero's being classy about this whole kidnapping business. I mean, this is how I go about it whenever I want to invite somebody to an event. Although it did tend to cause a real stir when I was a kid and it was time to bring around all my friends for a birthday party. Their parents weren't too keen on that.
What?
What's that voice?
Are we really going to do this with you just sitting on top of me? They hurriedly entangled themselves from one another and struggled to their feet. Oh, I guess we're not. Their 7 companions had heard the voice as well, and many of their faces had gone pale. They looked around frantically, desperate to locate the source of the voice. At last they found it, a speaker set in the ceiling. The voice was harsh, obscured occasionally by the crackle of static. It is kind of a raspy voice, but in a really fake, modulated way. Kind of like Zero fucked up his throat with jewel pods instead of actual cigarettes.
This is...
Junpei recognized it. How could he have forgotten it?
That guy in the gas mask! Hey, asshole! What the hell is this? Come on out here. I want to get a look at you.
What do you mean to do to us?
Oh, damn. I didn't realize Zero came right out and addressed the fact that we had returning players to the nonary game. I guess that makes Snake's previous comment about all the pieces coming together a little less cryptic, but it does confirm that he's been through this at least once before.
Nonary game.
What the hell's that?
The voice continued, implacable.
What is he talking about?
Hey, there's something in my pocket. Check this out.
Silver reached into his pocket and pulled out a small slip of paper. The rest of them reached into their own pockets and pulled out similar slips of paper. Junpei followed suit and dug into the pockets of his pants. He felt the telltale crumple of paper, slightly damp from his earlier ordeal.
Hey, I got one too.
Then it would seem Zero has seen fit to grace us each with a letter. Would you mind terribly reading it to us, young man?
His request had been delivered to Junpei, who, after a short moment of surprise, did as he'd been asked.
On this ship, you will find a handful of doors emblazoned with numbers. We will call them the numbered doors. The doors in front of you are a pair of the same. The key to opening these numbered doors are the numbered bracelets that each of you possess. Should you total the numbers on your numbered bracelets, and find that the digital root of that number is equal to the number of that door, the door will open. Only those who have opened the door may pass through. There are, however, limits. Only 3 to 5 people can pass through one numbered door. All those who enter must leave, and all who enter must contribute. So this thing on my arm is a bracelet.
He glanced around. It looked like everyone else had one on as well, and had come to much the same conclusion.
The purpose of the game is simple. Leave this ship alive. It is hidden, but an exit can be found. Seek a way out. Seek a door that carries a 9.
There's one last thing I must tell you. As you have no doubt surmised, this ship has begun to sink. On April 14, 1912, the famous ocean liner Titanic crashed into Earth's moon. After remaining afloat for 2 hours and 40 days, it sank beneath the waters of the North Atlantic. I will give you more time. 9 hours. That is the time you will be given to make your escape.
The voice finished, and the speaker went silent.
I hear a bell.
I think it's coming from over by the stairs.
It's the clock telling us the time.
Everyone had their eyes on the antique clock embedded in the wall. 7, 8, 9... The sound of the 9th bell faded away. The 10th never came.
Rang 9 times, so 9 o'clock then?
I think it's 9 p.m. I couldn't see anything when I tried looking out the window earlier.
I mean, that was a submerged window. I'm not sure how much light you would have been able to see through there regardless.
It has to be nighttime.
If that is the case, then we would need to escape by 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Now it is time. Let our game begin. I wish you all the best of luck.
The speaker went silent and did not speak again. Alright guys, this feels like an appropriate moment of levity to end on, so I'm going to go ahead and cut things off here for now. I did originally intend to go a little further in this episode, because I thought doing so would help alleviate some of the pacing issues I alluded to at the beginning of the video, and I wanted to avoid too much of an info dump in the next episode. But honestly, I'm still pretty new to editing, and I already bit off a little more than I'm used to getting this far. Other than a few attempts at layering rotoscoped footage, this is easily the most ambitious project I've worked on, and far and away the most time-consuming. That said, it did afford me the opportunity to try and go about things in ways I never have before, and I think those efforts will go a long way towards streamlining my skills as I compile our future adventures with Junpei. But yeah, thank you to anyone who happened across this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.